It was just past dawn when I raised my rifle. The mist was still curled around the treetops, and the only sound was the crunch of frost beneath my boots. Hunting wasn't a sport to me, it was memory. My father's voice in my ear. The rhythm of breath. The stillness before the shot. I'd spotted the buck near the edge of a clearing, broad and calm, unaware. One clean shot, just like I was taught. But before I could even step toward the fallen animal, I heard its sharp heels on gravel and a voice laced with judgment. "Well, well, playing soldier again, are we?" said Madeline Foster, president of the HOA. She stood there in her black blazer like she owned the forest. Phone in hand, already snapping photos. "This is a residential community, Mr. Brooks," she sneered. "Your behavior is dangerous and barbaric." I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off. "I'll be reporting this. You're a threat to our peaceful neighborhood." She turned and walked away like she'd already won something. But that morning, with the frost still clinging to the earth, I knew one thing. She had just pulled the wrong trigger. 3 days later, I found a white envelope taped to my front door, thick paper, red seal, HOA letterhead bold like a warning. I sat at the kitchen table, opened it with a knife I used to clean fish. Inside was a notice of violation from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. The accusation? Engaging in hazardous hunting activities within proximity to residential property, endangering public safety. The fine, 6-0. Deadline, 3 days. Failure to pay would result in legal action and potential termination of community residency privileges. I read the letter twice, then once more just to believe it. I had hunted legally, on land far beyond their little fences and petunias. But to them, it wasn't about the deer. It was about me. I went to the HOA office that afternoon. The meeting was already underway, a circle of folding chairs and smug smiles. Madeline sat at the center like a judge in a courtroom nobody asked for. "I see Mr. Brooks has graced us with his presence," she said, without even looking up. "I came to address this fine," I said, holding up the letter. "You have no right." "Actually we do," she interrupted, pulling out a binder thicker than a Bible. Clause 7.4. Any conduct deemed disruptive to community peace may be penalized accordingly. That includes firearms, even in nearby wooded areas. I noticed the projector beside her flickering with slides photos of families hiking through the woods. A brochure read, "Experience Willow Creek's private nature trails, exclusive access for residents." That forest they never owned? They were selling it like it was their backyard. I looked around at the nodding heads, the murmurs of, "He's dangerous," the sideways glances. They didn't see a veteran, or a neighbor. They saw a man who didn't belong and dared to walk where they pretended they owned. The next morning, I packed a thermos of coffee, slid the violation letter into my jacket, and drove into town. Willow County Land Records sat wedged between a shuttered diner and a bait shop with one flickering sign. I hadn't stepped inside a government building since my discharge. Didn't miss the smell of bureaucracy one bit. A young clerk named Amanda helped me after a brief wait. She was polite, a little startled when she saw the HOA letter. "I'm just trying to find out who owns the tract behind Lot 47 in Willow Creek," I said. She typed with speed and focus, then turned the screen toward me. 84 acres, parcel 10, B, not HOA property, she said. "It's privately owned." I leaned in. Clarence D. Haynes. Date of transfer, 1974. Last known address. A nursing facility, 2 towns over. Amanda printed the records and looked at me sideways. "Is this about those private trails the HOA keeps bragging about? People ask about them every week, and the story's always different." My hands tightened around the paper. I drove an hour out to Shady Pines Assisted Living, a modest building tucked beneath pine trees, quiet except for the birds. Clarence Haynes sat on the porch in a flannel shirt, eyes cloudy but alert. A nurse introduced us, and I pulled up a chair beside him. "You don't know me, sir," I began. "Name's Elijah Brooks. I live in Willow Creek. I believe you own the forest just beyond it." He chuckled softly. "Own it? Depends who you ask. The county says I do. The HOA sure acts like they do." I showed him the brochure, "Exclusive Trails, Community Access, stewarded by Willow Creek HOA." He stared at it a long time, then looked at me. They never asked. Not once, he said. My daddy left me that land. We used to cut firewood there. I stopped visiting after my knees gave out, but I never gave anyone permission to build trails or hang those bird feeders. I told him they'd find me, 6-0 for hunting there. He shook his head slowly. Lord have mercy. They fine you for being respectful while trespassing themselves. That's rich. He patted my arm. You're the first one who came and asked. That says something. I offered to send him photos of the woods as it is now. He smiled, then frowned. I'd sell that land if someone treated it right. Not to build fake trails or charge kids to look at squirrels, but to keep it how it was meant to be. I didn't say anything right away, but something started turning in my chest. Back in the truck, I looked at the deed again. HOA didn't just overreach. They lied. They built a kingdom on land that was never theirs. And now I knew exactly where the real line was drawn. I didn't sleep much that night. By sunrise, the decision was made. I called Shady Pines and asked to speak with Mr. Haynes again. They transferred me to a nurse, who said he'd be up for a conversation after breakfast. We sat in the same spot as before, porch creaking under us, breeze shaking the tall cedars. I've been thinking, I started. You said you might sell the land, if it were to someone who respected it. He nodded, slow and quiet. Well, I'd like to be that someone. Clarence turned to look at me, not surprised, just thoughtful. You ain't got HOA blood in you, do you? Not a drop. He chuckled. Good start. We talked numbers. He asked for 400, zero enough to cover his long-term care and the surgery he'd been putting off for years. I didn't haggle. I told him I'd pay in full, in cash, through a clean, legal process. No pressure, no games. I dipped into my retirement account, took out what was left of my military pension savings, and added the small inheritance my sister had left me. It was everything I had. Within a week, with the help of a real estate attorney named Maya Kim, sharp as a whip, and not fond of HOA nonsense, we finalized the paperwork. A full title transfer, registered with the county. As of Friday morning at 10:32 a.m., I, Elijah Brooks, was the legal owner of 120 acres of forest. Not just any forest. The forest. The one the Willow Creek HOA had been parading through for years. The same trails where they held their nature appreciation tours, where they installed benches and feeders without permission. Where they scolded me for setting foot as if I were trespassing in my own life. Not anymore. The first thing I did was walk the boundary lines, deed in my jacket pocket, boots crunching the frost-covered pine needles. Every bench, every trail marker, every plastic sign labeled Willow Creek Pathway stewarded by HOA, all of it sat there like relics of a fraud. They thought it was theirs. They never asked. They never cared who did own it. And now, they'd have to care. I stood at the highest point in the woods, a small rise that looked out over the trails below. I could see one of the HOA walking groups, tiny figures in pastel workout gear, trekking confidently across land they didn't own, gossiping, laughing, pointing out birds they didn't understand. They looked like tourists. And I was done being a stranger in my own backyard. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm into a meeting, not yet. But I did call a fencing company. And I ordered signs. Private property, trespassing prohibited. New ownership under Elijah Brooks. Let them read it and weep. Let them finally realize, the ground beneath their feet was never theirs to begin with. And the man they tried to shame? He just bought their kingdom out from under them. It didn't take long for word to spread. The first clue came when I spotted two HOA members, Janet and her husband Clark, standing at the edge of the woods, staring at the freshly posted signs like someone had dropped a body there. By the next morning, 3 more signs had been torn down. Didn't matter. I'd printed 20. Then came the knock. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind that doesn't wait. When I opened the door, Madeline Foster stood on my porch in her usual black blazer, white blouse, pearls perched like a badge of entitlement. Behind her was Marcus, her loyal vice president, holding a leather folder tight to his chest like it was loaded. Elijah, she began, her voice sweetened but tight. We need to discuss the unauthorized signage you've placed around our community walking trails. I stepped aside. I was expecting you, I said calmly. Please come in. She entered like a monarch entering enemy territory, nose slightly lifted, eyes scanning for flaws. Marcus shuffled in behind her, already sweating. We sat in my living room, a modest space with wood-paneled walls and the scent of pine still lingering from the morning fire. On the table in front of us was a single manila folder. She barely glanced at it. I understand you've been confused about property lines, Madeline began, lacing her fingers together. But the trails in those woods have been part of the Willow Creek experience for years, maintained, improved, used by families. We've invested time and money into that land. And yet, I replied, sliding the folder forward, none of it was yours. She paused. Marcus opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was a certified deed signed, sealed, and registered naming me as the sole legal owner of the 120-acre forest behind Willow Creek. Also included aerial maps, county boundary lines, and a notarized affidavit from Clarence Haynes himself. For a moment, the room went still. Then Madeline's smile cracked. This must be a mistake, she muttered, flipping through the documents. We've used that land for over a decade, established community use. You can't just buy it and lock us out. I didn't lock you out, I said, my voice even. I'm just closing what never should have been opened. Her eyes snapped up. You'll be hearing from our attorneys. I'm sure I will, I nodded. And I'll forward everything to mine. Maya Kim's her name. She's very thorough. Madeline stood abruptly, face flushed. This is absurd. The HOA has rights. Those trails are community space. No, I said gently. They were stolen space, polished up, repackaged, and sold to residents as part of a lie. She tried to speak again, but I raised a Hanslow, calm, final. From this day forward, I said, leaning slightly forward, anyone who enters that forest without written permission will be trespassing, and they will be prosecuted. I have trail cameras, posted signage, and a clean title. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Madeline's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I continued. If you wish to continue your community walks, you'll need to do them somewhere else. The forest is no longer your playground, and I suggest you stop calling it a part of Willow Creek. The silence that followed was thick. Then, almost in a whisper, Madeline said, You think you've won something here? I looked her dead in the eye. No, Miss Foster, I didn't win. I simply took back what was never yours. She stormed out without another word. Marcus lingered by the door, looking at me with a mixture of apology and fear. Then he followed her, letting the screen door slam behind him. I stood alone, watching their silhouettes disappear down the driveway. Behind me, the manila folder still sat OpenTruth laid bare in black ink and seal. Outside, the wind stirred the pines. And for the first time in weeks, I breathed easy. The war wasn't over. But the battle? That one was mine. The forest was mine now, but the silence from the HOA was too quiet, too fast. And in neighborhoods like Willow Creek, quiet didn't mean peace. It meant plotting. 1 week after the confrontation, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside, a printed flyer for an HOA fundraising gala dated 3 months earlier with the bold headline. Support our Nature Trail Preservation Fund, Goal 90-0. My hands stiffened. I remembered seeing yard signs about it last fall. Help keep our trails safe, protect community access, invest in nature. But those trails had never belonged to the community. Now I held proof they'd raised nearly 90-0 on a lie. That night, while sorting firewood, I heard the soft crunch of gravel approaching. A figure emerged from the dark slight, hesitant but familiar. Richard Harlan, the HOA's former treasurer. He looked thinner than I remembered, his blazer wrinkled, tie askew, eyes darting nervously. I need to talk, he said, voice low, inside. I let him in without a word. He didn't sit, just opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, worn at the edges. When he laid it on the table, I saw invoices, transfers, checks. After your confrontation with Madeline, he began. I started reviewing the past few years. I couldn't sleep. He pointed to one document. $18,500 paid to Civic Green Solutions. Another one. $300 for environmental assessments. All funneled through the same company. Guess who owns Civic Green Solutions, he said. I didn't need to guess. Trevor Foster, Madeline's husband. And the rest? A paper trail leading straight to Patricia Bennett, sister of Marcus, the HOA vice president. They'd awarded themselves contracts for work that never happened. Fake assessments, imaginary improvements, and all funded by the pockets of trusting homeowners. Richard looked at me, eyes hollow. They said it was legal, that we were saving the community time and money by keeping it in-house. I believed them, at first. I asked why he was telling me this now. Because you're the only one they're afraid of, he said. And because I should have spoken up a long time ago. He left me with the folder, hands shaking. The next morning, I called Emily Grant, a reporter from the Willow County Herald. She was sharp, curious, and didn't mind upsetting powerful people. After 1 hour with the documents, she raised an eyebrow and said, "This isn't just shady bookkeeping. This is classic laundering, fake vendors, no audits, HOA money turned private." "You can print it?" I asked. She smiled. "Oh, I'll do more than that." I also contacted the County Financial Crimes Division and submitted a formal complaint, attaching everything Richard gave me. Within 48 hours, an agent named Detective Laura McCain called me directly. "We're reviewing your materials, Mr. Brooks," she said. "This is serious. If these documents check out, we're potentially looking at embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to misuse nonprofit funds." By the weekend, subpoenas were issued for HOA banking records. And by Monday, Emily's article hit the front page. Exclusive. Willow Creek O raises $90,000 for trails it didn't own, funds linked to president's husband's company. Residents were stunned. Some felt betrayed, others angry. A few even apologized to me as I passed by, nodding in silence. Madeline, of course, issued a statement defensive and dripping with denial. "These accusations are politically motivated and meant to distract from Mr. Brooks's aggressive behavior toward our community," she wrote. But the damage was done. The kingdom she built on appearances and intimidation now had cracks running through every brick. And the people inside? They were starting to see through the paint. For the first time since I moved in, I didn't feel like a ghost in this neighborhood. I felt like a witness. And now, the whole town was watching. The flyer showed up on every doorstep that Thursday morning, glossy paper, gold foil text, and a smiling photo of Madeline beneath the words. Willow Creek Nature Walk. Celebrate our community trails. Saturday at 9 a.m., families welcome. Let's reclaim what's ours. It wasn't just a walk. It was a stunt. A desperate move to salvage her control, to paint me as the villain who'd stolen their beloved woods. And she wasn't subtle. Social media lit up with hashtags like Save Our Forest and Stop Elijah, all carefully seeded by HOA loyalists. But what Madeline didn't know was that I was ready. By Friday afternoon, the county had officially approved the new designation for my land. Private Conservation Zone. I'd filed the paperwork through my attorney, ensuring the forest was now legally protected not from nature, but from people like her. Saturday morning came clear and bright. I stood near the main entrance to the trail, now sealed with a heavy wooden gate and flanked by tall steel signs. Private property, wildlife preserve. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I wore my old army jacket, boots laced tight, and a calm that came from knowing truth was finally louder than power. By 9:10, they came. Madeline led the crowd like a pageant queen returning from exile, designer vest, hiking stick she clearly didn't know how to use, and a photographer from the Willow Gazette in tow. Behind her were dozens of residents, some hesitant, others fired up by her speech on community pride. She approached the gate with a theatrical flair. "This is outrageous," she declared, loud enough for every camera. "These are our trails, we've walked them for years. This fence is illegal." I stepped forward. "Good morning, Madeline." She flinched at the sound of my voice. "This land," I said calmly, "is now a registered conservation area, fully owned by me and protected under county ordinance. You and your group are trespassing." She scoffed. "You can't stop us all." Behind her, a few residents shifted nervously. a couple of them already turning back toward their cars. Just then 3 sheriff cruisers pulled up. Doors opened. Out stepped Detective Laura McCain and 2 uniformed officers. Madeline's voice cracked. "What is this?" "Mrs. Foster," said McCain, holding a folder of warrants. "You are under investigation for financial misconduct, fraudulent fundraising, and unauthorized use of private property." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madeline tried to laugh. "This is ridiculous. He's setting me up." "You can explain that at the station," McCain replied flatly. One officer stepped forward and read her rights. Her face, usually tight with control, went pale. Her hands trembled as cuffs clicked into place behind her back. Somewhere behind me, a camera shutter snapped. Marcus, the vice president, stood frozen. Someone whispered his name, but he didn't move. His silence spoke volumes. The crowd, once gathered to cheer her on, now stood mute, eyes wide, expressions stunned. And then applause. It started slow, a single clap, then another, then the whole group. Mothers, veterans, retirees, even children, confused but smiling. Not because someone was arrested, but because justice had finally arrived. As Madeline was escorted past me, I met her eyes one last time. No gloating, no smile, just truth. "You could have asked," I said quietly. "But you never did." She didn't reply. The woman who once ruled over lawn colors, mailbox heights, and who walked the trails like a queen was now just a name on a court docket. As the cruisers pulled away, I turned back toward the woods. The trees stood still, as they always had. Watching. Waiting. And now finally protected. 1 year later, the forest was quieter than ever and more alive than it had ever been. The old trails had grown in just enough to blur the footprints of those who used to walk them with entitlement. Birdsong replaced the sound of gossip. Wind rustled through cedar and pine instead of polyester tracksuits. Nature had reclaimed what was always hers with a little help from me. But not all doors stayed closed. Every Saturday morning, I unlocked the southern gate, where a small wooden sign now read, "The Haynes Educational Trail for those who come to learn." Local kids, escorted by their science teachers or scout leaders, wandered through in small, respectful groups. I worked with a nonprofit to build benches from fallen trees and mounted plaques with names of native plants. We even placed a handmade box for field notes children scribbled their wonder in crayon. We saw a fox. "It smells like rain and leaves." Why are mushrooms so quiet? They didn't come to conquer. They came to understand. And that made all the difference. But one rule had never changed. No members of the former HOA board were allowed in, not even to peek, not even if they came with kids in tow or forced a smile. This wasn't about revenge. It was about principle. Some boundaries don't exist to divide, they exist to teach. The community had changed. With Madeline, Marcus, and Trevor long gone, their reputations buried deeper than roots, the new HOA operated with transparency and humility. Sarah, now HOA president, often dropped by with updates or requests to collaborate on real projects, like waste disposal or wildfire safety. She never once asked about reopening the trails. She didn't have to. She understood. One spring afternoon, a group of children from the local elementary school visited. Their teacher had emailed me weeks in advance. I met them by the gate with a smile and a folded trail map. They lined up eagerly, eyes wide, backpacks bouncing. "Do we get to see the waterfall?" one boy asked. I chuckled. "If you follow the path and listen more than you talk, you just might." They trotted ahead, careful feet on soft earth, trailing behind their teacher like ducklings in a line. I walked to my favorite spot, a stone bench nestled beneath a towering red cedar. From there, I could see the slope where Madeline once stood with cameras and threats. That clearing, once scarred by politics, now held only clover and dappled sunlight. Above it all, standing tall, was a hand-carved wooden sign. "This forest remembers who respected it." And who didn't. I sat down, let the weight of a quiet year settle on my shoulders. Some days, I still heard echoes the sound of Madeline's voice, sharp with judgment, Marcus's nervous silence, the applause when justice came. But most days, I heard birdsong and children laughing. That was enough. A butterfly landed on my knee, yellow wings flickering in the sun. I didn't move, because some things aren't meant to be touched, only witnessed. As the wind stirred the high branches, I whispered to no one in particular. Some fences aren't built to keep people out. They're built to protect what they never understood. And behind me, the trail stayed closed. Not out of bitterness, but out of remembrance.